spirit is kicking in, and he's only respected in soulless communities. They love, and he's given the reputation of being called the Elephant Man because he's bagged the elephant. He's bagged the big one, and he's made a fortune. Everyone's trying to do that, and the paparazzi in the UK is appalling. It's appalling. It really is. So anyway, he's there, and so he's drinking too much. He's eating. He's doing this. It's all falling apart. And he's in an Indian restaurant after the pubs are closed, and he hears this lady, and she's talking about this Ayurvedic retreat and how wonderful and how it's changed her life. So, you know, he surreptitiously tunes in, asks the name, gets the name, basically gets all the info, decides he can go, and he's off to India. Before he knows what he's done, because he's freelance, he arrives in India. And so he gets his bags, and this is going to be the taxi ride to the clinic. Now, I've met this person that I'm talking about, who's going to be the taxi driver. Indian people are lovely. They are so nice. They're so nice they make you feel bad about being you. They are really, really nice people. And so Freddie basically comes out, just pouring a sweat, you know, there's all the taxis around, all the rickshaws around looking like mozzies, like looking for a feed, and there he is. So Freddie walks outside. He's now met his taxi driver. He's going to go straight to the clinic. Freddie, and so they get in the car. And one has to understand, driving in India is an experience. So Freddie felt like he was going to have a heart attack. The driver, Vikram, had seemed like an all right guy when he was walking, but was a full-on maniac behind the wheel. His lack of control of the trolley had a left-hand bias, so Freddie's had to do it like a Texas two-step out of place, right? And the guy's come along, completely totaled this Indian lady, and he's going like, yeah, but I've got a live one here, I can't dilly-dally, I have to get over. So off you go. So, anyway, the lack of control of the trolley with left-hand bias should have been a clue for Freddie, but this was just crazy. They had missed oncoming trucks that were blaring their horns and pedestrians by a hair. After 10 minutes of madness with his heart palpitating and doing somersaults, Freddie asked Vikram if he could slow down. The driver took his eyes off the road, swiveled round to stare at Freddie in the back seat, nonplussed. Time stood still. Vikram wagged his head from side to side and simply said, "Why?" "Look out," said Freddie. The driver turned back and swerved to miss an oncoming truck. "Your good name, please?" The driver beamed at Freddie as now pleasantries were beginning. "Freddie," said Freddie. "Belly, a fine name, sir. My name is Vikram. I am a Hindu." Freddie was speechless, completely lost in space as the car flew at a breakneck pace. I'll say that again, breakneck pace. "Alrighty, I have a friend called Benny," said Vikram. "Nice fellow. He's a Christian, just like you." Vikram was on. "Your purpose for coming to India, Mr. Belly?" he asked with great ceremony. "Many reasons, but health is one of them," said Freddie, trying to calm down. "I have very high cholesterol." Vikram wagged his head in agreement and understanding. "I hear that cholesterol-forming lactose lattes are very popular in the West these days," he said with great certainty and importance. "Yes," said Freddie, liking this man immensely, despite him being a maniac. Vikram then stared into the rear-view mirror at Freddie's large belly being tossed this way and that, and said, "I think your parents had wonderful insight to call you by that wonderful name when you were born. It suits you so well." Vikram was full on now. "I am thinking that you come from a very gifted family." Freddie smiled back into the driver's rear mirror, thinking that if having a decent backhand in tennis is anything to go by, then his mother was gifted. Vikram paused for a minute before launching into what up to then had been light-hearted rhetoric. "Where is your good lady wife, Mrs. Belly?" "I don't have one," said Freddie, hypnotised by the raw speed of the car he was travelling in, as well as the trucks, cars, rickshaws, carts, cattle, push bikes, motorbikes, and to cap it all, buses so crammed with people they looked like they'd explode. His culture shock went into overdrive as he spotted an elephant walking nonchalantly along the side of the road. "But Mr. Belly," said Vikram, bringing Freddie's attention back to the amiable maniac in the front seat, "you seem like a fine fellow to me. You must have a wife." Vikram was visibly upset for Freddie. "With no wife, there can be no little bellies in this world. And with no little bellies, who is going to look after you when you are old and withered?" His driving had deteriorated alarmingly as this compassionate man contemplated the crisis of a man who he had just met. Freddie desperately tried to retrieve the situation. "There's still time," he said, clutching straws. Vikram miraculously brightened. "Of course there is, of course there is," he said. "At least you are a good Christian man." Freddie went stumm, said nothing. The last thing he wanted right now was to upset this delightful maniac who was flying along like a Grand Prix driver in the final trial lap, which would decide where he would be placed on the grid. He wasn't falling for that one, even though he'd never been in church since Sunday school. He noticed that Vikram was giving him a full-body scan in the back mirror. "Goodness me, Mr. Belly," he said. "You really are such a well-built fellow. There would be plenty ladies very happy to be with such a fine-looking man as you. You must weigh... Let me guess. Please, don't tell me. Don't. I'm good at this," said Vikram. The car was weaving from side to side. "Okay," said Freddie, thinking he wouldn't survive the spin. "Oh, won't. 235 pounds, said Vikram. Am I right? Freddie couldn't quite get his head around the full-on enthusiasm of this amiable maniac at the wheel. Here he was, looking at his life, feeling that he'd never been as purposeful as this man in front of him, determined to guess his weight. £240, said Freddie glumly. "I knew it! I just knew it!" said Vikram. It looked like his head was going to come off his hinges and go flying out the window. Miraculously, it remained on his shoulders. "We in India, we like a man to have weight. It shows he is wealthy and healthy. Yes, Mr. Belly," said Vikram, as he made his mind up. "I think you are going to like India a lot. I also think India is going to like you. Mark my words, sir," he said, holding his index finger up next to his thumb of his left hand. Got that one right. "I am never wrong." He honked his horn as he approached a car that had done nothing wrong before swerving to his right to overtake. Freddie lurched violently to his left as the seatbelts were broken. This is India, of course. Freddie stared in the rear mirror at this man who had the whitest teeth he had ever seen, and eyes that conveyed innocence and conviction. Pure love poured out of this man. Freddie would have believed every word he said if he'd been talking about anyone but him. Vikram returned his focus to his driving duties. He floored the gas pedal and sounded his horn at absolutely nothing at all. The paparazzo pro in Freddie was intrigued, so he asked Vikram why he sounded his horn at nothing at all. "In India, Mr. Belly, it is far safer to have no brakes than no horn. That, sir," he said with a smile that would have dazzled any Hollywood casting director, "is very dangerous indeed, because people cannot get out of the way." Freddie swallowed his saliva. "How are your brakes then?" "Not as good as my horn," said Vikram, laughing on the headway. "Well, nothing could be that good," said Freddie. Vikram hit the horn again as both men looked at each other in the rearview mirror and laughed. Vikram appeared to be so happy he looked like he was going to explode. Mercifully, they arrived at the clinic unscathed. Freddie staggered out of the taxi like a drunk, his typical condition after last orders being called in a British pub before closing time. His legs were shaky, he was sweating buckets and desperate for a cigarette. A diminutive older man in his mid-60s stepped forward to greet him with the most disarming smile and not enough fat on him to fry an egg. No chance of that, as this was a strictly vegetarian retreat. It was evening now and the bugs were going bonkers, launching kamikaze attacks on the lights. Any lights. "Welcome, Mr. Freddie," said the owner warmly. "My name is Vishnu. I am very pleased to make your acquaintance. Please follow me." Freddie looked round to see about his bag. "Please don't worry," said Vishnu with a flick of his wrist. "They will be sent to your room." Freddie stepped inside the maid complex, where overhead fans mercifully cooled the oppressively hot, humid air. In his office, Vishnu motioned for him to sit down and offered him a cup of pink Ayurveda water. "It is so good to see you in person," Vishnu said. "Please settle in, and the doctor will see you tomorrow, once you've had a good night's rest and she finishes her rounds with other patients. I mentioned some issues to her, but thought it better you explain them yourself. The one thing I did take the liberty to do, though," he continued with his head on the wag, "was order the cholesterol medicine, which will begin at 6 a.m. By now, Freddie was so shell-shocked he'd agreed to anything. "Thank you," he said, as his laboured breathing began to normalise. "Is your driver all right?" asked Freddie, still wriggling from the journey to the clinic. "Well, of course," said Vishnu. "Did he in any way offend you?" He stood up, ready for action. No, even in India. Freddie was learning fast. "Can I go to my room now, please?" he asked, looking to escape before he blew it again. Of course," said Vishnu. "If there is anything at all," he said, wagging his head, "you just let me know." "I will," said Freddie. "Thank you." "Please take this with you," said Vishnu. "It is the daily schedule of what happens here in the Ayurveda clinic." A young man bearing a torch had arrived to show Freddie where he would be staying for the next 5 weeks. Freddie followed the young man to his room, and they stepped into the sparse, uncomplicated living quarters. He explained where everything was, and in a blur of confusion, Freddie took in the basics. When the young man left, he filled up his pail of water, doused himself down with his measuring drug, dried off, cranked the loud, large, overhead fan to maximum, and fell into a deep sleep like no other he could remember. It was the first night in 8 years that Freddie Field had not had a drink or cigarette before going to bed. So that's the, so I'm writing this stuff and I'm like, well, that's all right. I like this. So anyway, I wrote this book, and what happens is that Freddie obviously goes through some very difficult times, and people, you know, some of the in India, from what I've experienced, you get the really nice people, but you always get the wannabes, the Indian wannabes. They usually talk in very voices. It's all very serious stuff. So Freddie comes across this. He comes across that, and basically he gets better and better. It gets a lot worse, and then he eventually, I'm going to tell you the ending because it's very cool. Basically, after 4 weeks, the taxi driver comes back to see him, and he's just like exploding with joy, you know, and the whole thing, like he always was. And they go off, and they have this thing, it's called the Thrisapuram. It's where the gods come together for, the gods and goddesses come together in celebration. But this is this is India. In India, like somewhere else, there might be 1,000 people, or a couple of, there's like, it's something like about 150,000 people go there, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. And they have these 25 elephants either side, all done up with these different things. And everyone's going bonkers. And the music, it goes on for like about 10 hours. I mean, they've got some staying power, these Indians, I'm telling you. They are. And they stay. And everyone's going bonkers and all that. So anyway, Freddie goes and they see the performance and all that. Now, I mean, I've seen this is fact. The elephants, they've got all this weight on, they're standing there for 8-9 hours, the music, everyone's going bonkers. They freak out. I'd freak out. And I'm not even an elephant. They freak out and then they do run amok. Now, it's an incredible thing in India, but they have certain consequences are accepted. They just accept them, you know, and they accept that they're going to have a rogue elephant or two go ploughing through the people. Yeah, every year, right? It's just bonkers. They then have the national TV companies. They're there to film it. It's just like macabre setup. They're like ready for this like destruction, this mayhem. You're going to be witnessing. Yeah, it's insane. So anyway, in the story, the way I've got it, Freddie's there, and he's with Vikram, and coming towards him is this charging tusker. And Freddie pushes Vikram out the way, and along comes his tusker, and he sees this little green flash, half his size, or under that, run towards the elephant, and it's this little girl, and he runs and he pushes the little girl out the way, and this elephant just tables him. Right? Up goes Freddie, up in the air, down it goes. It's just done, right? And the elephant stops. The little girl runs round and she grabs the elephant's leg and squeezes the daylights out of this elephant's leg. The elephant remembers when a baby elephant, his baby elephant, come round and put his trunk around his leg. And he puts his trunk on the little girl's head, which is considered a Hindu blessing. That's a blessing. And of course, Freddie comes out and he goes, snap, and then collapses back. So then all the media come and they're all around him and all that. And so Freddie immediately gets the name as the Carolyn Elephant Man. Well, remember, he's the elephant man. Yes, before, but this is a bit different now. So he becomes very famous, da-da-da. Anyway, he ends up, he has a friend, and she becomes considered a blessed child. And the Hindus, and they do this thing, and so the Hindus basically, so the whole folklore of the Purim continues. So that was what, anyway, Freddie also meets a guy that is a cool guy. He's from Houston. He wears like Indian clothes, never wears anything else. He's from Houston. And again, when you've been places, you kind of, you know, you bit of artistic license there, and a little bit there, and a load there, to get the stories going. So anyway, they end up going to an ashram, and then Wilson, basically, Freddie finds out, because Freddie's changed now, he's really changed. Freddie finds out that he has been financing this orphanage for 5 years. And the good thing for me was that I've spent quite a lot of time in Indian orphanages, because I used to go there for the healings, and I would see, like, you know, hundreds of children. So I kind of know the structure of how these places are, and how wonderful they are, and how appalling they are too, you know, because they are. They're you know, you think you know things, and you see that, it's like, wow, you know, you talk about karma, and you talk about having a rough ride. Check out an Indian orphanage. That's a rough ride. So anyway, so what it is that we go along, they go along there and they start to finance it. They basically go to a place called Varanasi. Now, Varanasi is a place that's the holiest city in India. And in Varanasi, they basically have the burning the pyres. So the dead bodies, they basically line them up and they burn them, and then they scatter them in the Ganges. That's what they do. They've been doing it for thousands of years. Anyway, tragically, Wilson dies, and Freddie does this ceremony and everything else, and then he goes back to the orphanages, because this is the wish that he felt that Wilson would want. And then he finds that the shot that he did has become the shot all around the world. It's just this little girl squeezing the daylights out of this elephant. And the heading is on the head of on National Geographic front page, and it shows them that, and it says love conquers all, and that's it. And so with this, they're able to finance like 4 or 5 different orphanages. That's the book. Okay. Cool. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and so that but I always the whole point of it is it's very much about comedy. I mean, as much as it then goes into these different things, you know, because it is all the same, you know, comedy and tragedy and stuff like that. And so I took a lot longer than I thought on that one, but there we go, because I've never done this before, because I'm just winging it. So, not much. Yeah, and everyone's going, we can see that. So,
I didn't say anything.
For once. So anyway, the other things that I've been doing is I write fables for children, and I found that it's very interesting this, because with the fables when they were coming through, I didn't realise that I was being primed for a spiritual healing, because I would get a vision, I would see something, I would hear something, and I would feel something. And I'm thinking this is just all good fun. So I was just loving it. And I would write these fables, and I'm going to give you a blast. And one of them is called Thomas the Tarantula. Okay? Yeah, get ready. I remember I went into this spiritualist church. I used to do these things where there was this great medium, and I used to be like part of her double act, and I was like the first intro, you know. And